Yeah, good morning, everybody. So I'm the pleasure to start this session on groundwater with the project over. So I will. So the project has this very long title is showing you is related to groundwater quality and in relation to the geological control and to the anthropogenic elements. It was a quite large project and it was some challenges because of that. So the heterogeneity of knowledge and the groundwater quality data over Europe, we had to produce some products that can use data that are collected at a very different scale and in different way. Sometimes we have very precise local data, even with the depth related information. And some areas we have just one shot or very few data, incomplete data set. And some other times, some very long-term monitoring. And there was 29 surveys involved in this project, what is very nice. But then there was also a very different point of view, different ways of handling geology, hydrogeology, and having different working methods. So OVER is a diversified project. Why I say that? It's because there was very different numbers of countries involved in each of the work packages. In some work packages, it's only 2 surveys and sometimes up to 17. In the way we upscale the point information, when you collect quality data, it's usually at 1 point. So you have to make to upscale this information, of course. So you use statistics. Sometimes we said it's for the whole country. Sometimes we use liturgical classes. Sometimes simplified transfer models, groundwater bodies, and so on. Also, we have produced different results and different way to present the result. There is a 1D map, timescale maps, interactive maps, pilot site description, and scientific and technical reports, more classical guidelines. Also, we have considered the links between groundwater quality and the human health, ecology, diffuse pollution, but also urban and agriculture pressure, and at the end, global change. So all this diversity is making many different products. So in a very short time, I will present you some of these products by work packages, because work packages are linked to the type of product of data we use. So the first one is related to the element of natural origin or geogenic elements. So one of the interesting products we have proposed is the thermal and natural mineral waters. So here you can see the sites, but also you have an interactive menu where you can select temperature, conductivity. You have also trace elements concentration. You have different information. So you can have a really very great and large information on this mineral and thermal water. In the same work packages, you have also a small focus on arsenic and fluoride, where you can see an indicator called hydrogeotoxicity, what is a health indicator. So here you have a maps of the information on fluoride. And the last product is related to the natural background level. There was no map related, but we have developed a method based on the bridge method. That is the original method made to evaluate the natural background level at European level. The work package 4 is more smaller. It's looking at sites. It is site specific because it's looking at very particular information. What is the bacterial diversity related to the biodegradation of 5 contaminants? It is specific to hyporheic zone, so it's a relation between the groundwater and surface water. So there was 3 sites, one in France and 2 in Denmark, and you see that they have considered very various bacterial diversity and 3 pesticides and 2 antibiotics. So the results cannot be upscaled now, but it's a very important tool for the future, to build for the future this new survey and new monitoring using bacteria. WP5 is related mainly to nitrates with some pesticide information. So one of the important products is the model estimates of nitrate stored in the insaturated zone. So you can see here the maps for 19 years, but you have also time scale, so you can change the time and go up to the year 2000. And you can see how this nitrate stored in the insaturated change with time. Again, and complementary to this information, we have 2 products. So in the right, you can see the transfer time in years. So you can see the very important contrast between, for example, England and France with salt aquifers, and Denmark and Netherlands with more shallow aquifers, where the nitrates transfer in 1 to 5 years, while in France and England, in some parts, you need more than 40 years for nitrate to cross all this unsaturated zone. And one of the last products is the maps on oxic conditions, where you can see percentage of points on anoxic conditions, oxic conditions on mixed conditions, what is directly related to the denitrification. And you have 2 scales. One is at national scale in the upper part, and also you have this information at groundwater body scales. The work package 6 is related to the groundwater edge range. It is they have worked mainly on pilot sites, so there was more than 20 pilot sites, and it is expected even some more. So here you can see the location. So in each of these sampling sites, there was a collection of many information as more as possible. And then we could build a first database of groundwater edge range. Here you have first maps of this range. So it's red, it's quite young groundwater. And in the purple, you have the oldest groundwater. Based on the information collected, we have also produced some guidelines on the best practices, how to use this information on groundwater edge. WP7 is a vulnerability to pollution. So at the beginning of the project, there was a great inventory of which methods have been used. And at the end, the surveys decided to go for drastic. So it was a common decision. So the drastic map is based on existing product, like this one's on hydraulic conductivity, on a product that was built during the project, like here you have the depth to groundwater, what is also related to the work package on nitrate in the unsaturated zone. Other information like the soil media that is available elsewhere. And at the end, we arrive to a drastic map. So it's vulnerability classes in 5 classes from very low to very high, where you can see here the result in the countries that have participated to the project. And in some karstic places, it was decided to use the COP method. So here I have also this site for the COP vulnerability, but of course it's much smaller sites because it's a few of them that have used this method. WP8 is on organic contaminant of emerging interest. So there was a great work on the inventory of how the countries are monitoring their and which elements they are monitoring. So it was based in published data and in unpublished data. So what was available in the surveys. So from this inventory, you can see here that the carbamazepine is very often monitored, while some elements are nearly never studied in the countries. And complementary to this information, they made first a sampling and analytical comparison exercise. It is not a complete one because there was few sites only and few laboratories. So, but even with that, we show that there was a very large variability for the same samples of result. And based on this experience, we have proposed some guidelines how to better samples and how to analyze this product, and also how you should care when you interpret the data because of this great variability in the result. So at the end, you saw only a few of the products made by OVA, but in the web page, you can see here an overview. You have for all the work packages, even there is no real maps, you can see which countries were involved in which of the work packages. So then you can click there, and here you can see that you have also all the reports produced, link, so you can see whether you are in Germany, that looking at this report is maybe not of interest for you because the country was not involved, for example. So here I repeat the site of EGDI of OVA, but of course you will see much more product from EGDI in the future. So OVA is also not only these maps, but it's also some international publication, some conferences to show the results. We made a newsletter so a grid community can follow the work, and we try as much as possible to interact with other organisms like USGS, EIA, GRC, and so on. And there was also a great work for general public communication using Facebook, blogs, LinkedIn, and so on. So thank you. That's it for over now. So I leave the share for the next presentation. What is...
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. And then I can introduce you to the project Groundwater Resource, which deals with groundwater resources at a European and pan-European and a cross-border scale. Sorry, it should be able. Yeah. So the objectives of the project were to demonstrate the potentials of harmonization of information about Europe's groundwater resources, and to provide good practices for harmonized data and information across borders. And we do that at different scales. In two work packages, work package 3 and 4, we have cross-border studies where we explore data and information on the border between the Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium in one case, and Poland, Lithuania in the other case. But we also used our work. Well, we've been working on a European groundwater resources map, where we try to harmonize groundwater resources at a European scale. The project typically involves regional, national, and EU stakeholders, and we try to maximize our dissemination using easy access tool. I will show some of those in a minute. Well, the challenges that we have actually, before we started, we didn't have any geological surveys, harmonized approaches for groundwater, not as for minerals. So if we look at data from the US, you see they are able to identify their prime aquifers, and we actually could not do so very well. We have some 2D data, so there is the UNESCO legend-based map of Europe. It's actually a 2D map showing productive and less productive aquifers. And we did some work as surveys also for the bridge, in the bridge project, in order to make a fundament for the EU groundwater directive. But there's actually no 3D information about groundwater volumes, etc. So we tried to do that in a resource project involving many of the European surveys. I think in total 33 regional surveys and national surveys. And on the right side, you see one of the products, but I'll come to that later. We used a grid-sized approach, a grid approach by 10 by 10 kilometers square, where we find a harmonized way to gather and collect our data. Let's first have a look at some of these cross-border studies. This is the Dutch, Flemish, Belgian, German cross-border, which we called H3O+. Here you see a view of the groundwater quality viewer that we developed, where you see that we can now assess data on both each side of the border, in this case for sulfate. There's another web viewer embed also for groundwater heads, so groundwater quantity data. I will show that in a minute. I'll give you some more details about that. But the idea is, again, that we harmonized our data across the border and are now able to to look at them in a concise, effective way. The other work package dealt with another cross-border study between Poland and Lithuania. You see the border area where a groundwater model was built based on a harmonized hydrogeological data set. That was produced for the project. The fifth work package worked on karst and chalk characterization as a specific form of groundwater resources, but which are more vulnerable typically than intergranular aquifers. And so a scheme and a typology was made that both addresses vulnerability to pollution, but also storage capacity. If you have a system with a large storage capacity and which is not very vulnerable to pollution, that might provide a drinking water source or a source of water far more effectively than one which is vulnerable for pollution or has only limited storage capacities. And we have 15 pilot studies across Europe. In the blue colors, you see all karst and chalk areas over Europe. And these pilots were used to test whether time series data could be helpful in order to make distinction between these different things. You see quite a diverse range if you look at the classification between vulnerability and storage. Well, there's also a tool developed which can now be used to assess time series and to find out what kind of storage characteristics are for the specific system that you are studying. And then the Pan-European Groundwater Resources Map. So again, it was made based on a 10 by 10 kilometer square grid, which we then filled by the different geological surveys based on a harmonized criteria. This is the overall groundwater storage map, which shows groundwater storage in cubic kilometers. And you see there's quite some storage in areas like parts of the UK, Netherlands, the Paris Basin, the Pannonian Basin in Hungary, etc. And as well in Spain, but you see more limited resources in the Nordic countries, for example. Please also know that we have participants from Cyprus to Iceland and from Portugal to Finland. So it really tried to cover most of Europe, and unfortunately not all federal states have been able to support this work yet. This is the transmissivity map. So it gives you an idea about how easily we can draw water from an aquifer. And you can see there are quite large differences over Europe again. We also used our methodology with the 3D grid and the 3D information to make a new aquifer type map, which is similar to the original UNESCO map, but now based on hydrogeophases as we define them, and with a more quantitative assessment behind it. So in blue is the highly productive aquifers. Darker color include more highly productive environments than lighter colors, and the green gives you the fissured aquifer types. And then we can make further refinements. So now we're only looking at groundwater storage in quaternary aquifers. So we use the geological time scale, and we could do similar for Cretaceous aquifers, which are mainly here in the Paris Basin and parts of the UK, which is the chalks. You can see the groundwater storage in Cretaceous aquifers all over Europe spotted. Then you can make further distinction between unconfined aquifers, which are typically more vulnerable for pollution, or confined aquifers, which you find in the main European basins, like the Paris and Pannonian basins shown here. And we started to also map paleo water. The map is not complete, but it gives you at least some locations where we have that available. Well, all these products are now available on the European Geological Data Infrastructure. And you can, so for example, access the data from this using the web viewer for this Dutch, German, Belgium cross-border study, or looking at all the reports and data on this Polish-Lithuanian study. You can have the fact sheets of all the karst and chalk aquifers that we have been exploring. And we can also find the reports where we try to make comparisons between those. Well, let's now have a look at some of the web viewers. These are directly available from the website using a link, and you can use this user and password in order to approach it. Well, this map shows for this cross-border area, it shows main groundwater heads over the complete region. You can see it includes data from all the 3 countries. And we have the opportunity to select 2 geological formations, which are there in the subsurface around 100 to 200 meter depth. And you see that groundwater head, of course, decreases from the southeast to the northwest. But now I went to the trend part of the web viewer. You can see the red colors, which actually indicate that there's declining groundwater heads in these areas. And we zoom in into one of those wells, and we can see that there is indeed a gradual groundwater head decline. And then if we look further and we look at the different screens within a multi-level well, we can see the green and blue that there's actually quite a drop in groundwater levels since 1985 up to now, indicating that in these pumped aquifers we have, which is the Pesticides and kieselolied aquifers in this case, show that there's quite a drawdown of groundwater due to that pumping. We can also look at that in a cross-sectional view. So we draw a line over the area where we'd like to have our cross-section, and you can immediately see that we have, on the right we have Germany, on the left we have the center of the Netherlands, and all the red colors that you see in these brownish and yellowish aquifers indicate that we have declining groundwater heads, and we can study them now in relation to, well, drinking water resources, but also irrigation, pumping for irrigation. Next, we can go one step further and select the specific area. So the core area here is the Rhine-Ruhr Valley Graben, part of the structural system over Europe. If we take data from that, you see in the orange client color, that there are decreasing trends, and they are there in more than 50% of the cases. And if you aggregate that data, so this tool, it allows you to aggregate the data of all these monitoring points into a overall drop in groundwater levels. And you can see this for 2 formations. This is the kieselolied formation, showing that there has been a considerable drop of 4 or 5 meters over this complete area during the last, for example, 15 years. Well, that was one of the web viewers that we developed. There's another web viewer on groundwater quality data. Similarly, I'd like to show you also some work on the overall GeoERA website. So you can access all the data from resource, but also from the other projects through the GeoERA homepage. Have a look at all the deliverables, download them, or start the web viewer with a direct link, or go to the overall map viewer. And I now show the overall web viewer of each DI project, where you can see that we can click on the different parts of the resource project, showing all the pilot areas like we shown on the maps before. And you can go to these maps and find information there on karst aquifers, etc. So you can directly assess all the information that we collected on a public scale. So you could also use the existing US UNESCO map showing all these aquifer types over Europe, and you can combine that with the new information from the pan-European groundwater mapping. So this is groundwater storage, and you can go through different submenus and looking at aquifer types, like I showed them before. Behind this whole system is a 3D grid, and the idea is that this makes a visualization out of that grid, and you can make interactive choices in order to get to this data. And the idea is that the total grid will also be published in an open access way, so that groundwater models at a global scale or a regional scale or a European scale can use it also to feed into their groundwater models, and for example, to study climate change. Well, now you have a look at the unconsolidated sedimentary aquifers. Here we have the fissured sedimentary aquifers, mainly in the Paris Basin, but also you see here in Spain. And you can also combine that data with data from other projects. For example, you can show the information from thermal resources from the Hoover project. In a minute, I'll show how you can go to this Hoover. So now we go to the Hoover database. We take the map of thermal waters and we can combine them with the groundwater resources we have been showing them up to now. Well, one of the other things that we did, but we don't have time to discuss that with you, but we tried to make a first estimate of the water balance using information about abstraction rates from a global groundwater model, recharge rates from the Tactic project, and our volumes that we defined for the aquifers as we collected our data together. This is all in a specific deliverable, number 6.5. You can easily find it on the GeoERA website if you are interested in having a better look at the sustainability and vulnerability of groundwater resources over Europe. Well, resources is also publications. We put much of our data on the ECR website, but also on Zenodo, which is a data repository from CERN. We did a lot of work on webinars, and you can find quite some public communication by blogs, etc. So I hope there was an introduction to you for the GeoERA resource project, and I'd like to thank the complete resource team, which is only a part of here, together in Zagreb, and thank you especially for your attention.
Yes, thank you. I will proceed with a presentation of the Tactic project. The Tactic project is tools for assessment of climate change, impact on groundwater and adaptation strategies. The objectives of Tactic is to contribute to the development of coherent and transparent assessments of climate change impacts on groundwater and surface water. In more detail, to identify and collect the available data that is often stored by the GSOs, the Geological Surveys, to easily access maps and results produced in the assessments carried out in the different projects and Tactic, and showing these results at the information platform. Also to share knowledge of how to do these assessments among GSOs, because there's very different levels of knowledge and experience on how to do climate change assessments among the different GSOs. A part of this is to develop guidelines and describe tools that can be used depending on the different data availabilities that are at the different countries. And this is done by demonstrating the different tools to assess climate change impacts in various pilots across the continent. And that, of course, includes different hydrogeological conditions and climatologies across Europe. So overall, the Tactic concept is that we started out making this Tactic toolbox, collecting what is the tools actually used by the GSOs to assess climate change impact on groundwater and describe these tools. And a part of that is also to describe what is the available data. Based on this toolbox, provide guidelines to use the tools and do assessments in the 41 pilots used in Tactic, and provide the information and the outcomes of the assessments on the information platform. And also a part of that is to to synthesize about how to actually produce results that can be used long term for climate change impacts, because you can produce a lot of results from different models, and it's necessary to harmonize these outputs. Otherwise, they cannot be compared for future purposes. So this is just an illustration of the Tactic Toolbox, and it actually ended out with 57 tools shared among the GeoERA partners to assess climate change impacts on groundwater. And the toolbox consists on an overview where you can actually see what is your available data, and based on the available data you can actually see, okay, what kind of models or tools can I use to assess climate change impact on groundwater. And of course each tool are described in detail, so you can go into the tool description and see exactly what is needed for running this tool or using this tool. And that is important if you are maybe in a level where you don't have so much experience in making these climate change assessments. So now I will go into a presentation of basically some of the outcomes. Of course, only a small part. The first sort of scientific work package was about using integrated models. That means three-dimensional groundwater models and hydrological models to assess impacts on groundwater. And these impacts can both be shallow groundwater, deeper groundwater. It can be groundwater related to groundwater dependent ecosystems, and that can both be aquatic or terrestrial. Another part of this is looking at climate change assessments on flooding and drought. So there are different sort of groundwater conditions that results are needed for. So the first thing in this work package was to create a standard climate change scenarios. And that is very important, because otherwise you cannot compare the results that you produce in the different parts of Europe. For instance, the climate models, one climate model in an ensemble of climate models is maybe very suitable for some condition in the northern part of Europe, but are totally different in the southern parts. And therefore it's necessary to use a standard set of climate change scenarios, so that results from different countries, different hydrological models can actually be compared. Next was to propagate these standard scenarios through the different integrated hydrological models or groundwater models. It should be said that the standard scenarios was also used in the other work packages that did not use hydrological or three-dimensional groundwater models. Next, and the last thing was actually propose these kind of results. How would we like to store them in the GIP database for future use? And there are a lot of outputs you can generate from hydrological models, for instance. So it's very important that we propose some standard ways of storing these results. So again, they can actually be compared with future results. And this is an example where we have one of the standard scenarios with a 3-degree difference for the future, and we can see how conditions in the northern Europe and also the Eastern Europe for this scenario is getting wetter, but the more you move to the south and in Spain, it's still very it's a very sort of drier conditions prevail, even though this scenario is sort of the most wet scenarios of the 4 standard scenarios we have used. In VP4, one of the big achievements was to generate a pan-European potential recharge map This recharge map is produced in a combination of satellite data, but also these satellite data are used together with data from local and national models, and combined with these remote sensing and combined with machine learning, a potential recharge map of Europe was generated. So here you can see actually the remote sensing data input, the local data that was then with a different kind of relevant data type through machine learning. You got a potential recharge map out of this, and that was a big achievement of this work package 4 about groundwater recharge. Work package 5 was about assessment of saltwater intrusion status and vulnerability, and that is a very relevant groundwater question for the future, because as we all know, sea level will rise, and we will not have fewer, and also in some areas where drier conditions seem to be the future, we will have more stresses on the groundwater, and therefore it's very relevant to look at this issue of saltwater intrusion. And that was done in different pilot areas, and this is just an example from Spain, where a model was set up looking at this issue. So the last sort of scientific work package was about groundwater adaptation strategies. So you can see in VP3 there were results where we looked at how will the raw climate change affect the changing weather, impact future groundwaters with 4 different scenarios. And what we saw was that in some areas of Europe, as you probably most of you know, we will have drier conditions. And in these areas, for instance, Spain, we have done different assessments on how can we sort of mitigate this climate change by adaptation strategies. And these different strategies was then tested to see, okay, but how will the future conditions be when we look at these drier conditions? So there were different scenarios and different mitigation strategies tested. In the other end of Europe, in the northern part, we often see that flooding, more groundwater recharge will reduce in more groundwater flooding. So we need to adapt to these sort of future higher groundwater levels. And this is just an example from one of the case studies in Tactic in Denmark, where we see actually we have tested different adaptation strategies. For instance, how will forestation affect future groundwater levels, and different drainage scenarios were tested. So both the adaptation, we have examples and tested strategies both toward flooding and drought. And of course, there's a lot of things going on between these sort of extremes. Another thing I would like to emphasize here is that we can see that it's very important that we have a local evaluation of these things, because of a lot of local issues, a lot of local geological knowledge, hydrogeological knowledge are important to make correct assessments and mitigation strategies for climate change. And last, I would like just to thank all the partners in Tactic. Thanks to the Tactic team, and of course, I should say a special thanks to the work package leaders, myself, Maggie from BGS, Elaine from BRGM, and then David from ICME in Spain. And of course, I'm, as you maybe know, substituting for the Tactic, the real coordinator, Peter van der Keur. He's ill right now. And then when we started out, we should also thank Anker, that was the coordinator in the start. So thanks a lot.
You're muted, Marco.
I was muted. Again. There you go. Okay, so I repeat myself since I was muted. Okay, my name is Marco Bianchi, and I'm going to present the last project of the GeoERA groundwater project. The project is called VOGERA, which stands for Vulnerability of Shallow Groundwater Resources to Deep Subsurface Energy-Related Activities. So the focus of the project are energy-related activities in the subsurface, such as conventional oil and gas, shale gas, coal bed methane, geothermal, energy, and gas storage. These activities, they can induce a physical and chemical changes.
Sorry, Marco.
Yeah.
We do not see your presentation in presenter's mode, and we start on slide 5. So at least that.
Do you see it now? I share again. Because it's okay for me.
Okay.
Let's try again. Now I don't see my presentation at all in the sharing. That's strange. It was working before.
Marco, I can
About
share
now?
my screen if you want. No, we don't see. Yeah, but it's still not in presentation mode. Yeah.
How about now?
Great.
Now it is. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, I start over again, third time. Hopefully it works now. Okay, my name is Marco Bianchi. I'm gonna present, VOGERA. So I start, is it okay now? Yeah, okay, I assume so.
Yes, it's fine.
All right, sorry about that. So the focus of the VOGERA project are energy-related activities in the subsurface, including conventional oil and gas, shale gas, coal bed methane, geothermal, energy, and gas storage. So I was saying that these type of activities, they may induce physical and chemical changes in the subsurface. They can introduce new chemical substances, and also they can cause the movement of pre-existing fluids. So the key questions is what is the impact of on groundwater quality? And what is the vulnerability of a groundwater resource with respect to these activities? So the objective of VOGERA is basically to improve the understanding of vulnerability of shallow groundwater resources from these energy-related activities. And why we wanted to study this problem is, well, first of all, we want to protect groundwater resources, but also we want to allow to provide insight to allow an informed and responsible use of the deep subsurface. And last, we want also to develop a European-wide approach that is consistent for vulnerability assessment, that is consistent across all energy activities. So VOGERA is a much smaller project compared to the previous three that the presenter presented before, and it has only 2 technical work packages. So in work package 3, the activities carried out as part of this work package were aimed at understanding the processes and pathways that may be associated with the impacts on groundwater resources from energy-related activities. And the focus was in particular on 4 pilot studies, the Velo Pickering in the UK, the Rauw Fault in Belgium, the Peel Boundary Fault in the Netherlands, and the Pannonian Basin. We produced 2 reports describing an overview of the geological and hydrogeological setting, but also existing infrastructure and all the available data and information in order to assess possible pathway for energy-related activity to groundwater resources in those areas. In work package 4, one of the main results was the development of a series of conceptual models that describe the potential contaminant pathway for different energy activities. And this was for different hydrogeological settings in Europe and for different activities. This work, so for each, allowed also a comparison between different activities and a comparison of the pathways and other properties and of each activity. Also in work package 4, we developed a vulnerability tool. So we developed a screening methodology for characterizing the vulnerability of shallow groundwater resources. And this tool, differently from existing tools for vulnerability study, for example, Drought, it specifically addresses the problem of a contamination from deep underground rather than from the surface. And also we tested this screening methodology at the pilot site. Very briefly, the vulnerability characterization approach starts from, you can see here in the graph, starts from a 3-dimensional conceptual model of geology and hydrogeology, from which the user can derive values for geological and hydrogeological factors, which control what we call the intrinsic vulnerability, and then also specific vulnerability, basically the hazard related to the specific activity in the subsurface. Once the user collected all the scores for the different factors, then we can calculate a specific vulnerability score, and that combined with the value of the groundwater resource, we have a risk output. And so the user can understand what is the potential risk for each receptor in the subsurface related to that specific energy-related activity. So in the intrinsic vulnerability assessment, the factors that we decided were important were the vertical and lateral separation between the source and the receptor, the presence of low permeability units that can prevent the vertical movement of contamination from deep underground to shallow groundwater resources, the groundwater flow potential, the presence of faults or solution features that can enhance the movement of contaminants, and also anthropogenic features such as mines and boreholes. And for the hazard assessment, so that's for calculating the specific vulnerability. Basically, it depends on the type of the activity, and in particular, the factors that we thought that were the most important were the type of the release mechanism of potential contaminants, and also the presence of a vertical gradient connecting deep underground to shallow groundwater resources. So at the end, the application of the screening activity, once all the factors are taken into account and summed together, we have the result is, as I said, a potential risk group for each unit in the studied area. So to facilitate the application of the screening activity, we developed a spreadsheet tool that is available from the GeoERA website. So if you want, if you are interested, you can download the screening tool and look how it works and maybe test it at your sites. So to conclude, I want the key project results. So we developed conceptual models to characterize groundwater vulnerability and identify potential contaminant pathways. We developed a novel methodology for vulnerability assessment for this type of activities. And also by applying this at 4 pilot studies across Europe, we present a detailed study of groundwater vulnerability. The impact of the project, we think that we improve understanding of groundwater vulnerability in relation to this to deep energy related activities. We introduce a consistent approach and tool, and also we improve our understanding of contamination pathway impact of subsurface activities on groundwater in 4 strategic areas. Thank you very much, and apology for the technical problem before.
Thank you, Marco. It seems that we will have some time for questions, but it seems that also many people were not attending when Laurence gave her talk. So maybe somebody is suggesting to at least repeat the first part of that. Would that be okay for you, Laurence? And then we can take questions to all the 4 groundwater projects afterwards.
So I will not repeat everything because some people were there.
But as far as Peter wrote, only 20 in the beginning, and maybe myself including was not attending at that time because of delay in the others. So yeah, please go ahead.
Can you read it now?
Yes.
Okay, so just we'll not repeat everything, but just the introduction of the talk. So OVER is related to groundwater quality and linking the quality data acquired around Europe to the geological and hydrogeological information and to the anthropogenic pressure. So it was an interesting project because we had many counterparts that it make it very nice, but it also make it quite complicated sometimes because there was different approach. Each of the surveys, sometimes they have a different way to interpret hydrogeology or to show it or to draw it. There was different working method, and we have a very various type of data, sometimes very precise long-term monitoring, and sometimes quite scare or just some one-shot information. So with that, we produced quite a diversified project where in some work packages we had up to 17 surveys participating and sometimes only 2. One of the challenge was to make it how we can upscale the point information, because the quality data is sometimes not easy to extrapolate to large areas. So we use different ways of extrapolating the information, some statistics, sometimes it was countryside, sometimes lithological classes. So we use the simplified transfer model, groundwater bodies. There was different tools we used, and you can see in the EGI platform. So there was a 1D map, there is a timescale maps, interactive maps, pilot sub description, scientific and technical reports, and guidelines. And also we try to link groundwater quality to different targets and topics such as human health, ecology, diffuse pollution, urban, agriculture pressure, and global change. So I just repeat the WP3. So I hope after all the participants reach the session. So the WP3 is related to the natural element of natural origin, so geogenic elements. We have produced a nice service of thermal and natural mineral waters. So we can see here the sampling points, the source. But you can also have more information on each of these points, location. You can have temperature range, you can have conductivity, you have also some trace elements, some major elements, and you can play around with this tool. And there was a special focus on fluoride and arsenic, where you can see here for fluoride, we use the hydrogeotoxicity indicators linked to the EARTH, and you can also, we have also updated the bridge method to calculate the natural background level. So maybe I should stop here for the repeating presentation, and maybe go directly to the last one in case you haven't seen it. So there was 8 work packages with different topics, and everything is available, of course, in the platform, where you can also have the links directly to the report. So you can link your country if you are interested more precisely to one country, and you can see whether you have results on these topics, and you can go directly to the reports. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Laurence. We have time for questions and comments, and please use the Q&A box for that. So I see a couple of questions now. There's one from Denise saying, regarding the too little, too much, too polluted. I guess she's referring to my entry slide at the introduction of the groundwater projects. And well, yeah, can we answer that question yet? She writes, and it depends very much on where you are, but we can actually experience all of that in the same place and varying through the seasons. So definitely it's we experience that too little, too much, and too polluted in many places across Europe. I hope that answer is satisfying. And then we have one from Sophie Kala. So maybe that's a question for you, Jacob.
Yes.
What are the main challenges that appear within the groundwater projects due to geographical climatic differences from north to south of Europe?
Of course, it's difficult for me to answer for the other 3 projects, but I think the question was maybe related a bit to the climate change issues and the impact on hydrology and groundwater. And so basically, I think what is very clear is that the hydrological extremes are the important issues regarding impact on groundwater and related to climate change. And I think the results that we showed here also shows that extremes are getting worse, droughts are getting longer, and but also in terms of flooding from having a groundwater table close to the surface, so the groundwater, there's no buffer in the groundwater, so immediately intensity rains will run off sufficiently because there's no buffer in the groundwater. So the hydrological extremes. Regarding the adaptation strategies, I think it's important to acknowledge that adaptation strategies can actually cause new problems and increase the already induced problems from the raw climate change. So we need to be very careful when we do adaptation strategies to really analyze the impact on hydrology and groundwater.
Thanks, Jacob. And I may add to that question that when Jacob presented the results from Tactic and the maps, one may get the impression that okay, it's getting wetter in Northern Europe and it's getting drier in Southern Europe. And so that's simple to handle. But that doesn't mean that we cannot experience actually both droughts and floods in the same region within the same year. So and this is of course a big challenge for us to handle both these extremes, maybe within a short period of time.
Also, for your adaptation strategies, they need to both mitigate to both conditions in the same location, and that's not easy. So yeah, I agree.
And then we have another question here from Jean-Luc. Do you have a list of problematic pesticides and pesticides metabolites in European groundwaters?
Maybe I can start to reply.
Yeah, I guess.
So we did not focus too much on the pesticide, but in the work package 8 on emerging compounds, you have many metabolites that are considered as emerging compounds, and then you will have the inventory of how they are monitored and how often they are detected in groundwater. So you have 2 reports for WP8 that can reply to your question, at least for the newly known metabolites.
Yeah. And I may add that also in the HOVER project, there was some work done in work package 4 and work package 5. In work package 4, they investigated pesticide degradation in the groundwater surface water transition zone, and some specific pesticides. And in work package 5, they also studied the transport of pesticides towards groundwater. But I don't know anything on specific pesticides by mind, but you can find details in the reports via the website and map viewers. Please go ahead and ask questions if you have for all speakers, or for anything related to groundwater. If you have something on mind that you think is important to address or maybe take up in future projects. So we are also working on follow-up to GeoERA and hope to continue on working on groundwater quantity and quality for further developing the Geological Service for Europe. If you have any good ideas on that and comments, you are very welcome.
Yeah, Klaus, in case there are no questions, we're very close to the end of this session. So I'm not sure if anybody has any concluding remarks or whatever to make, but otherwise you can direct everybody to the next session as well.
Okay, then I will very briefly mention that this was actually the first time that we have been working together, collaborating between all geological surveys in Europe. And I must say I'm really happy with the results and what we actually achieved during this relatively short time, both learning each other competences and collaborating together. But not only between hydrogeologists, but also with our data scientists at the different surveys. So I'm quite happy with the final results. I don't know if any of you project leads have additional comments before we close. Then, if not, so then we have here another question. What do we say are the main challenges for groundwater research in northern parts of Europe to be addressed in future projects? Will any of you like to reply on that?
Well, I'm not sure how far north this is. If this is Sweden, that will definitely be different from Denmark and Netherlands. But I guess the main groundwater problems we have in semi-Nordic countries are still agricultural pollution of groundwater as a main challenge, and the other one is that we have to now deal with droughts and flash floods, which we're not used so much. So if we go to the more temporal parts like UK, Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, that's the case. For Sweden, Norway, Finland, I don't dare to say.
No,
We'll maybe add also that the emerging compounds like pharmaceuticals or PFAS are also some emerging problems that most probably are also in the northern part, like there is in France.
Definitely, yes. North and in Denmark, we also see we have been fighting many years with the nutrients and the agricultural pollution, as and speaker mentions, but pesticides. Pesticide pollution is also an increasing problem for us in Denmark.
We have to close off, Klaus, I'm afraid.
Nordic countries, you meant. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. We have to continue and close this session and go to the next one. You can push, I believe, the red phone on to the left, and then you leave the session and you can link to another one. So thank you all for
your attention,
participating in the session, and bye from us.